Welcome back, everyone. Happy New Year. Yeah, it's been like however many days since the New Year.
We're back.
It's our first time back, so Happy
17.
New Year. Thanks. So after some time for the holidays, time off, the show where you can get just one pixel of deep discussions with your video game conversations is back. You know it, you love it. Professor's Play.
Professor Play.
I'm your host, Professor Phil Chavot. He's Professor John Adams. He's Professor Brendan West, and together we're professors who play video games. That's us.
Neat.
This week we'll be finishing up our sessions on Pokemon Scarlet Violet and Pokemon in general. For now, because inevitably there will be a new Pokemon game at the end of this year.
An expansion?
Yeah, the
Right,
expansion is
yeah.
coming out. Yeah, they churn those out, man. With an episode today, the episode is on Pokemon lore and how the Pokemon world works. Spoiler alert: it is unclear, to say the least,
We don't know.
and convoluted, and that's why we love it.
Yep.
If you remember, dear listeners, of which there is more than one, this is your first time. I'm glad you're here. But every game or series we do, we're going to do 3 episodes usually. So we're going to do a lore episode, like a preview, a first impressions episode if we're playing for a couple weeks, and then a review episode. However, for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, because we wanted to nuzlocke it, essentially we created our own rules for how to play the game. We wanted to start with that, and then we're doing the lore episode as a bonus episode at the end. But next week, or in a couple of weeks, we'll have a different game, which we will announce at the end of the podcast, or a show. So stay tuned. Don't touch that dial. So last, but most definitely not least, because John and I have had many conversations about how the Pokemon world works outside of the logic displayed in the games, which is small. We're going to talk about that in the podcast today. So we're excited to share our theories and our doubts on how the world of Pokemon works or doesn't work. And John, today is his time to shine, because John, you're a resident Pokemon lore expert.
I don't know much, but I know enough to be confused.
Exactly. Yeah, I think
That's a good one.
here's the thing. I think that people that are confused about it are people that are thinking about it, and that's kind of the stuff that we do.
Right?
Because you're not really supposed to think about it, but that's not fun.
That's not fun.
That's not fun. So, John, how about you get us started?
Okay, well, I think we should understand first that what we are doing today is going for our Pokemon professorships. Right?
All right.
So, in Sword and Shield, Sonia, who is sort of your companion, your person you talk to, she's a little guide, she talks you through the game. She is studying under her grandmother, and her goal and dream is to become a Pokemon professor. Have you played or seen Sword and Shield at all?
No.
Okay. How long, roughly, would you think it takes to become a professor in the Pokemon world?
Gosh, I remember you told me how long it actually took her, but if we're gonna go like real world, God, 28 is like the real lower bound in terms of age.
Oh, you're measuring years. No. She does this in like 4 weeks. Becomes a full professor in 4 weeks. And how long would you think, knowing that it was 4 weeks, how long do you think her dissertation, her magnum opus, the thing that she wrote to become a professor is?
Actually,
Wait.
she becomes a professor before she writes it.
She becomes a professor before she writes it.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, she
Yeah.
pulled a me on that one.
Yeah, she's great.
Wait. How long is it in length, or how much of that like 4 weeks she spent
In
on
length.
it?
In length.
Oh God.
Actually,
okay,
both.
so 4 weeks of solid writing.
I don't think she
Hang
started
on,
at week
hang on.
1.
I was gonna say I have published a book. I know roughly how long I've
Nice
written.
plug. Nice plug.
I've written
Yeah.
3. I know how long it takes to write one, roughly. Okay, so let's see. If you're writing 1,000 words a day, which is really lowballing it, especially if you're 4 weeks out from deadline. All right, 1,000 words a day, so that's going to be 28,000 words, which is like 80 pages.
That'd be real reasonable. Yeah, hers is like 4. One of the cool things, if you don't know this, in the Scarlet and Violet games, you can go to the library in the Neuronha Academy.
Yep.
Look it up, and her dissertation is there. Her
Yeah.
prospectus is there.
Which is pretty cool.
Her
It's cool.
prospectus or her disc?
It's just 4 pages.
It's a book.
It's a book.
You place it on the shelf.
4
There's
pages.
4 pages that you can read. You put it back.
Yep.
It
And
looks
so
like a real book, though, because it has a
there-
bunch of blank pages, I'd assume.
There might be some more stuff in
Yeah.
there. And we know that she didn't write quite as much as you're saying because she also traveled the entire country and looked at a few monuments with plaques that were already there that pre-described that monument. And from that, she discovered what she was trying to learn, kind of. At the end, you end up figuring out anyway. She doesn't really figure out much, but she's there. And her grandmother, who is a professor, gives her a white jacket and says, "Now you are a Pokemon professor."
You're the Pokemon professor
of
now.
the Galar region.
Yeah.
The entire one.
Yes.
So if you're wondering what it takes to become a Pokemon professor, the answer is lots of nepotism. Crazy amounts of nepotism.
Well, actually, that you can see that in all the Pokemon games, not just this one.
In all the
Right,
Pokemon
like
games,
Pokemon
we
Blue.
will
Yeah.
definitely get into it.
Yeah.
So it takes a crazy amount of nepotism. You
Uh,
have to like write or record or do something, right? But very minimal. We have to hit 4 pages.
Like,
Oh,
you write a
no.
record or do something like write a book, or you record some Pokemon on the Pokedex and be like, observe a new behavior for a Pokemon,
exactly.
which is
So I could become
very.
So if I could become a Pokemon professor like today.
That is the hope.
Yes.
So I believe
Wow, you just-
that we're right
Wow.
here. I think if
I
we
swear
talk
this was
about
unscripted.
Pokemon,
Yeah.
if we talk about Pokemon for at least 20 minutes solid, and we make one new theory or discovery, we will have met the criteria, and we can all dub ourselves Pokemon professors.
Pokemon evolved from a common ancestor.
Like,
Got it.
There you go.
If you there was an early anime episode where they find a professor that is studying evolution, and he's supposed to be the expert in the world on evolution.
Knows the most.
So you get there and you find out that he's trying to understand how Slowpoke evolves into Slowbro, because that happens by Shelder biting its tail. But then the Shelder, when it bites its tail, it shifts from being like a Shelder to being like a spinny shell thing.
On its tail, yeah.
Right.
Conch, right?
So they start the episode with being like, I want to find out why when Shelder bites a Slowpoke's tail, why it becomes a spinny shell, a swirling one, and not a regular Shelder. At the end of the episode, they find out that a Shelder bites a Slowpoke's tail to evolve, because then it's a mutually beneficial relationship where the Slowpoke can now walk on 2 legs because it has the counterweight,
Weight.
and the Shelder can now go on land. They don't explain why what Shelder would want to do that, but the Shelder can now go on land. And the episode ends. They never talk about why the Shelder becomes a different animal.
Or why did it change as well?
And he
Let
says
drop.
that this discovery will win him the Nobel Prize in Pokemon research.
Wow, we're setting the bar real,
Real
low in
low.
this universe.
You
Great.
got it.
Can
You
I
got it.
can I port over here? Because I feel like I would just be the most famous scholar on the entire planet.
You have to remember that type matchups is a hard thing that people
Hard.
study years, and we're going to get into that. So today we're going to talk about a lot of different things. I have a lot of theories about the Pokemon universe works, and I want to start this conditionally right off the bat by saying we understand that the real answer to all these questions is the writers were busy, they didn't have time, they weren't quite invested enough, especially at the beginning, and they didn't plan some things out. That's not a fun way to look at this world.
Yeah, their answer to most of these things is because.
Because.
But-
I'm
but
gonna
that's-
need you to get all the way off my back about that
Why
one.
did you get all the way on that? But if you think about it, and we think, all right, let's imagine there was some internal consistency, and someone in the writers' room was kind of planning it. It opens up a lot of really interesting questions about how the Pokemon world works,
Yeah.
what Pokemon even are, and what we're doing here from a broader perspective. So in this lore episode, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna become Pokemon professors by talking through some basic questions.
Which again is a very low bar. You out there, listener, listening to this podcast,
The one listener.
you will become a single listener. You will become a Pokemon professor by the end of this episode as well.
Sure.
Chat
Dub thee.
ChatGPT is like already a Pokemon professor.
Yeah.
Easy. Easy.
So part of the discussion is that part of the reason it's so disconnected is because we talked about this. The Pokemon anime and the first Pokemon games and all that kind of stuff, it began before they cared about continuity in their IP or cared about the IP in general, beyond making money.
Right. What is IP? Just for everybody.
So intellectual property, right? So whenever you have like the Marvel Cinematic Universe is part of the Disney now IP, which means they own the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it has to exist with the Marvel comics, with other things. So if you're trying to create a single universe, it's very difficult, which is why comics have multiple realities and universes. Because when something happens in one reality, you can be like, oh, but in this reality that never happened. You're like, ah, cool, got it. The Pokemon universe, they're not clear about that.
Nope.
It's not in our world, but as they do jokes about our world
All the time.
All
and
the
it is
time.
there are overlaps. So there's some strange consistency, non-consistency. Now some people would hold the Pokemon universe in the games and the Pokemon universe in the show as 2 separate universes. We will not, because that's boring. We will treat them as the same universe because it's more interesting to assume that all of these implications cross over from one to the other. And so we're going to just talk about the Pokemon universe generally. So we're going to start with a very foundational question, right? Philosophy 101, what we would call in sort of philosophical terms, the ontology, or the nature of being, right?
Yeah.
What does it mean to be this thing? And we're going to start with a Pokemon. So what is a Pokemon?
I think it's just an animal.
I mean, that's the first thing that you would go to, right? You'd say it's an animal, right? But then there are things that obviously aren't animals, right?
Like your favorite, Klefki.
Why'd you bring that up?
Klefki
Klefki's
is
not that bad.
a set of keys.
A set of keys.
And apparently, they are really good at guarding keys. Spoiler alert. Wow. So, generations of noble families would give Klefki their most important keys, and it would keep them forever.
And it is true that Klefki is a key ring, specifically, that it collects the keys. Or, from Gen 1, right, we can think of more ridiculous ones. Muck, right?
Yeah.
Who is literally just a
He's
pile
animate
of
It's supposed to
sludge.
represent, water pollution, so I get it. But the drawing is just a pile of sludge with a mouth.
Okay, but...
I love Muck. I just want to...
Oh, I love Mugs too. Clearly, this is a world in which monsters exist, alright? Fire-breathing dragons, Salamence, Dragonite.
Well, and that's
These
inherent in the title.
exist.
These are pocket monsters.
Yeah.
Right?
So what I'm saying is, the category of animal in the Pokemon universe has to be more expansive than the category of animal in our universe.
I sort of agree, because at first, at least, there are animals, normal animals. There's a bird that is not a Pokemon. There are fish that are not Pokemon.
Fish in a fish tank, clearly displayed in one of the early episodes, in addition to Pokemon.
I thought I remembered there being, actual animals.
And they're not called Pokemon. They're
not.
called animals.
People eat animals. People do not eat Pokemon initially.
Initially.
They have...
The games, they say they do. In the show, they don't.
Yep. And then eventually
Although
they
in the
get a
show,
little mixed, a little commingled.
There's episodes where they're like, oh, maybe we should eat this Magikarp. And stuff like that.
So you can eat a Pokemon, but it's
just
not.
don't.
And there are animals, but Pokemon are not animals. Pokemon are monsters by definition. We know that Pokemon can inhabit all kinds of different crazy forms. Flowers, fire, inanimate fire, insects, bugs, birds, all kinds of stuff like that. They can even inhabit...
Balloons.
And this is the key part. They can even inhabit human souls that have passed on.
True.
And that, I think, is the real key to understanding what Pokemon is. Because there are certain
So
Pokemon...
why do we know that?
Yeah, what Pokemon's that?
Yeah, so there are a couple of them.
Yeah.
Spiritomb is the combined weight of 108 evil human souls bound together as a single unity. Ghastly is very specifically in the show described as a person who died and then later returned as a Ghastly, right? And then there are a couple of others. Bayonet is a possessed doll, when an evil soul possesses a doll. And then there are a few. There are a few different ghost Pokemon.
Most ghost Pokemon have a slight variation of that that happens. Yeah.
And it's described that ghost Pokemon can be the souls of Pokemon who have died, or the souls of people who have died. So that brings us to an interesting conclusion, right? There's a commingling here of humans and Pokemon's souls, where people can become Pokemon through horrific, dramatic death.
Yes.
In some form or
Yeah,
another.
the important thing is that none of these ghost Pokemon are ghost Pokemon because someone died happily.
Right.
So, Yamask is a really good one. Yamask is a ghost Pokemon that carries a mask, what looks like a mask to us, but really is just a human face, that it's his face when it died.
In a terrible visage.
And then they changed that. They took that away, but it's still there in the games that it was first in there.
Yeah.
So all of this leads to wild conclusions, which are that humans and Pokemon can be sort of exist in the same sphere. They're definitely not animals. They can inhabit innate things, and they are in some way.
So they look like animals, but they're not. They're not described as animals. Yes.
And they are in some way comprised of spiritual energy, because when humans die, their spiritual energy can become Pokemon. Some part of us that is ineffable becomes a Pokemon eventually. That leaves us to the question of Pokeballs themselves, right? Because when I was a kid and I was playing Pokemon, I would get the Pokemon, you kind of assumed that you threw the Pokeball shot out a laser beam, converted the Pokemon to light, and then put the Pokemon in the Pokeball and Willy Wonka'd it somehow, right? Made it tiny, reduced its size and matter. But
suspended animation also. It's just in there. It's just not alive in there. Yeah,
kind of. But they can listen. They know what's going on.
They can pop out.
And when you read the comics, the old comics, and if you play through Legends Arceus, they will tell you that this is not true. That in fact, the balls are actually just made of pine cones, basically, pine cones with fancy stuff on them. You can craft them out of pieces of rocks and twigs, and all they are is a mechanism to sort of open and close on demand when thrown. And when a Pokemon hits that Pokeball, it is the Pokemon themselves that convert to light, shrink down, miniaturize, and go into the Pokeball. So all Pokemon have this ability to sort of miniaturize themselves into light energy.
Not on command, but when interacting with the mechanism like the Pokeball.
When interacting with the mechanism like a Pokeball.
That sounds like someone was doing that John Carpenter, like, it's 3 a.m., I've got a six-pack here. Never mind, I'm going to mess up some lore.
Yep.
Yeah.
They did not think that one through.
So, we also know that they use spiritual energy because they use attacks like Shadow Ball.
Right.
And which humans cannot use Shadow Ball, but Pokemon can use Shadow Ball. So, like, that means they have some soul-like spiritual energy in there. They can become light. If you ever watch Steven Universe,
Right.
the main characters besides Steven are all they're all manifestations of gemstones that manifest their body in light. But they look real. You can touch them, you can hold them, but not, they can become a gemstone if they want. Which is similar here.
So, humans can't use Shadow Ball. Humans also can't use flamethrowers.
Correct.
Right.
Right? So, here's Pokemon theory number 1. I'm stealing this from one of my friends in college. See, Pokemon actually coexist with the Naruto universe, alright? Now, the Biju in Naruto, like the nine-tailed fox, alright, all the Biju
Our giant Pokemon.
have been split up, and so their energy is now scattered across the world. So instead of like 9 of these things, or 10 rather, we've got thousands of much weaker creatures, but still have like innate chakra.
So this is kind of where
in a weird way, you're right on the money.
Yeah.
You're right on the money.
We're just going more real world, less Naruto.
Yeah.
But yes.
But same sort of principles
yeah.
that it's pulling from. We're here with you. So Pokemon draws from like obviously Japanese traditions, and one of the classic Japanese traditions is Shintoism, or this idea that there are spirits everywhere, spirits and spiritual energy manifesting everything: trees, animals, plants, woodlands, entire areas or vast expanses like the
protected
ocean.
by a specific.
To protect these.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen movies like Princess Mononoke? They sort of give you a good basic idea of this concept, and there are lots of books that back it up. Pokemon are therefore these manifestations of giant spiritual energy. Now, I won't go as far as to say that the Nine-Tailed Fox itself was sped up and spread everywhere.
Dude, come on, there's literally a nine-tailed fox Pokemon. Like,
There's
it's
one.
right there in front
Yes,
of
right
but
there
actually
for
the
you.
Ninetales Fox Pokemon is a really famous spirit in Chinese lore.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we've got this interesting situation where these beings made of pure spiritual energy or light, right? If we want to be like Steven Universe is somehow related to the Pokemon universe.
Also, just
Right?
throw them in there.
Throw them in there. These beings of light have the ability to manifest and inhabit things.
Yeah.
So a Magikarp is not actually a fish. A Magikarp is a Shinto light spirit inhabiting a fish and transforming it into a fish monster. And this is also why when Pokemon evolve, they don't evolve by like horribly Akira style, like morphing with their muscles bursting out of their face. They just turn into a mote of light and then transform into the new figure, because the figure itself is just light enacting itself on this physical form.
It's also the reason they can evolve is because they gather enough spiritual energy to take on a new form.
So Pokemon...
And this also backs up why there's like Pokemon that are legendaries and Pokemon that are you see everywhere. Because you have Shinto spirits that are the spirit of flowers, so they're everywhere, and they're not super powerful. They can be, but they're not. That's not their job. But then you have a spirit that protects the entire forest, like
Celebi.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Time itself.
Yeah.
That one's going to be big. That one's going to be powerful. It's manifesting the energy of this entire
17
thing.
feet tall.
It also explains why originally they were like, there are 150 Pokemon, and now they're like, there are 1,000. Who knows how many there could be.
They always, to be fair, they always said, who knows how many there can be, even at the very beginning.
Who
They
knows
knew where
how
they
many
were
there
going
could
with this.
Pokemon theory number 2. Pokemon are growing. So wherever they started,
not in size, like their population.
Their population is growing,
Yes.
which is why at the beginning of the anime series we see animals, and now we no longer see any animals. All animals have been replaced by Pokemon.
And they don't talk about animals.
And they don't talk about animals because slowly the spirits are inhabiting everything, and we will eventually reach a continuum where there is not but Pokemon everywhere that you turn.
That's far in the future, though.
Far in the future. And I would argue that...
And they eat the animals, so that's why they're inhabiting new / more things, and also they eat animals because they have to survive, because now they have a corporal form, so they have to eat stuff.
So they eat other things. Sometimes other Pokemon.
Yes.
You know, because we get Pokedex entries of Ekans eating Pidgeys, or Ekans going after...
Zangoose and Sevipers and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right? So there's all this stuff. So that is Pokemon Theory 1. What are Pokemon? Beings of pure light that inhabit this world, that are slowly inhabiting more of this world, and cutting out the natural order of things by making it a Pokemon world.
They are
This is
protective Shinto spirits that become that instead of just inhabiting something and being like, I am a leaf that's alive, they are now an oddish that runs around and is also a leaf that's alive.
Okay, so what we're really talking about here is this is like it's almost Pokemon by way of H.P. Lovecraft. Only this is really like a Japanese horror film. All right,
Oh,
like I don't know. I mean, I don't know how familiar the audience, the one member out there, is
Okay,
with
we have
like
multiple views, okay?
dude. Like half of those are me.
Oh
No, not really.
Oh, thanks, man.
Not really.
Yeah, thanks, man.
I haven't looked this up at all. Because I'm trying not to do that. But anyways, like Japanese horror films often tend toward this sort of, I mean, it's almost like borderline like nihilistic total annihilation where...
Oh, every single JRPG, you start by like, find the subway line, and at the end it's like, kill God.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so like Cairo and Juan the Grudge, which are the only two Japanese films I've published on, both kind of do that thing where it's like, oh, humanity is just screwed, right? And so that's kind of what you're describing is like the proliferation of the spirits is like this unstoppable Lovecraftian thing where it's just
It is.
gonna
But they don't see
displace
it.
us.
Unlike a horror, it's a good thing because these spirits like us and want to work with us generally. So
Won't they
it's
destroy us though?
They will. So it's Lovecraftian in that way, but the part that's not horror is that the people in there don't realize that it's horror. They're just like, oh, more Pokemon, cool.
They are our current society with artificial intelligence.
Yeah, that
Wow,
that
how
just makes
healthy.
it more. That just makes it worse. That makes it more of a horror
So
thing. For
actually,
me.
we talk about this because we're like, if you look at some of the technology they have, you're like, wait, how did you build this? And the answer is Pokemon. They
Pokemon
use
built it.
Alakazam to use Psychic to move a giant building, to move things, to make things. They use Porygons to code stuff. They don't do things.
Can Keldor to carry. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Just wrote them in their phones,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah.
the more Pokemon proliferate, the more advanced technologically society gets, while people understand nothing,
Zero.
right? So
As we established, the basis for understanding what a Pokemon does and is very low.
very low.
Yeah.
So theory number 2, after we move sort of past Pokemon ontology, is people sociology of the Pokemon world. And the first thing you have to understand is that people in the Pokemon world have an IQ in the mid 60s, maybe 70s.
Maybe.
That sounds pretty accurate.
Okay,
yeah.
so first, Pokemon theory number 1, we have decided that Pokemon are not animals or objects. They are Shinto spirits
Shinto light spirits.
that now inhabit these things and manifest beyond just inhabiting them.
As
They
a
move
physical
around
thing.
as a physical
Alright.
thing. Theory number 2, sociology. People are not very smart in the Pokemon world.
maybe
real dumb.
maybe we should elaborate on that by saying that like average IQ in our reality is 100.
Yes.
Yep. Average IQ in our reality is 100. 60 would put you somewhere needing help to go about your daily life, usually, right?
I think Forrest Gump is 70.
Assistance to get through there. I am arguing that most people in the Pokemon universe are at around a 60, and it is only by the grace of their Pokemon, who are helping them a great deal, that they are able to live life.
Who at least have as much IQ as they do, and
Yep.
some of them much more.
much more.
much more.
Metagross,
Yep.
Alakazam, Mewtwo.
Yep.
And so they would sort of like sit in their village and die of starvation, but luckily these tiny little olive plants come and literally bring olives into them and say, come, don't starve. And that's why we have olive festivals where we have to roll giant olives across Scarlet, because the only way these people are subsisting. And we know this because all of their deep insights are really basic level things, right? Oh my goodness.
And you could say, oh, it's a kid's game, but we're not going to say that.
We're not gonna say that.
We're going to say that they should know these things.
Yes.
So the type matchup things, the more I think about that, I'm like, well, I go back and forth. Sometimes I'm like, for us, it's easy to see type matchups because we can literally go into a menu in-game and be like, this is a water type. I'm going up against a whatever electric type. I probably don't want to do that.
Right.
But if you're just a regular person in the Pokemon world who doesn't have a Pokedex, who just like caught a Weasel, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna go against a Pomo, which is an electric type, or like whatever, fight it.
Right.
Which is implications we'll talk about in a little bit. But you don't really know these things because you've never seen a Pomo. We have seen all these things because we are main characters.
But if Pokemon existed in our world for a minute, if they were real and we were here, who thankfully are quite a bit smarter than Pokemon world people, the first thing you would do when you got a Weasel is you get on Wikipedia, look up, be like, all right, what is a Weasel? There's only 1,000 species, which compared to the species of animals, not
Yes.
that many. You'd be like, Weasel's a water type. Water types are effective against these types. These are things that people have to go to Naranja Academy for years to understand.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, for us, we can Wikipedia it up. For people in the Pokemon world, that resource doesn't exist.
Wait, how old is the Pokemon world?
At least 300 years. So Arceus happens 300 years before present time.
Oh, and in Scarlet, we established that they go back like 10,000 years.
Which creates some interesting...
Yeah.
Okay,
stuff.
then they don't have that excuse, because I was going to say it almost sounds like they're just really, really, really like...
Rapid development?
No, kind of, yeah, but because of the Pokemon, but it's
Yeah.
like they're really new to history, and so
They kind of
they only have like an ancient Greek's understanding of biology.
They kind of... Yes, because all the like findings they make are like that, where it's like, oh, wow, this Pokemon is blue and swims, it likes water, I guess. That's kind of what they do. But then you also have situations where the Pokemon Center, they put a UV light on these things and it heals them. And they understand that at some point.
And that is the interesting thing. So when we talk about like Pokemon healing, right? Talk about them being light spirits. Pokemon don't heal through normal means. We don't see people like bandaging and putting Pokemon in casts. We do a little bit in the very first episode with a Pikachu that refuses to get into its ball.
Mm-hmm.
But for every Pokemon that is able to get into its ball and exist in its ball, all we have is a dun, 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 all better.
Yeah.
And that's because they're not actually healing a
Sorry,
physical
what was that?
corporeal form. Dun, 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 dun. I'll do it all day. They're not actually healing a physical corporeal form. They're just healing like this light form. And the humans know how to do this, presumably because at some point some Pokemon showed
Like a
them.
Chansey
Yeah.
did something.
Or not,
Yes.
yeah.
The Nurse Joys in the world, which are the people that run every Pokemon Center everywhere.
Let's get back to the social aspect.
Wait, I think
Yes.
we're missing something here though. There's an early episode of Pokemon I watched it at my grandparents' house when I was a kid, in which a bunch of Muck and Grimer
Yes.
are attacking like the hospital, and they said the machines that we need to save all the Pokemon aren't working. So they do understand. They do have at least like some hospital equipment, right?
Yeah,
'Cause,
the machines are the UV ray lights that go over the Pokemon.
And they understand working, not working. But if you asked a Nurse Joy, I believe, if you asked her, you said, wait a minute, how many cc's of morphine do you need to give a tiny Pikachu? She would be like, what? Like, I don't think the Nurse Joys... I think Nurse Joys have the competency to take Pokemon on trays, put them into UV light machine developed by an Alakazam, UV light that stuff, give it back.
And that's not to say, that's not a criticism of Nurse Joy's.
No, this is
The
everybody.
criticism of how the Pokemon world sets up these societal, like, I'm going to say jobs, but really they're just occupations that keep going for generations.
Right.
Yes.
Wait.
Because, like, every Nurse Joy
Works in a hospital
nurse.
and runs that hospital.
Every officer Jenny is an officer
Every Jenny's an
who
officer.
works in a different city, and so on and so forth.
Okay, but what about when Ash goes to fight Lieutenant Surge and he sees that idiot who tried to take a Pikachu into or a Pidgey into the electric gym?
Yes.
But like the Pidgey's being like I seem to remember this now. I haven't watched it since I was a kid.
No, you're right. Yeah.
I remember the Pidgey being brought out on like a
Stretcher.
flipping stretcher,
Yes.
right? And they're like wheeling it into the hospital.
Do you see them do anything hospitally to that Pidgey, though?
Is there not an IV? Am I inventing that one?
There's an IV
There's an
rack.
IV. There's
for
an IV
sure.
rack. It's
Yep.
not on the Pidgey, though.
It's not on the Pidgey. It's just there.
Oh, okay.
They just know that this technology needs to be used because Alakazam has constructed it. It's just they know it needs to be used, but they don't know. And it's taken away on stretcher because it is so incapacitated it cannot return to its Pokeball, which is possible. Pokemon
Yes.
can die. Because
As-
we learned,
Yeah, we
learned
learned
in-
this.
If anybody's ever read, there's a Lavender Town copy pasta that goes into a lot of creepypasta that goes into a lot of detail about how Lavender Town works and is haunted. It's quite an entertaining read, even if it's not real. But it does point out quite effectively that Gary's Raticate probably dies of something in the first one
Yes.
and is
in
then
the first game.
put in the graveyard at Lavender Town. So
Yeah.
Pokemon can die, and I argue they die when they're no longer able to convert themselves to light.
It's
Well-
also implicated that Raticate is the ghost Pokemon you catch.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, also there's the Cubone's mom,
Cubone's mom.
and so you need
There's a lot of
Soul
theories
Stone.
about how Cubone's moms die. So one of them is that the Cubone, like kind of like a reverse, not a reverse, but a similar situation to the praying mantis, kills its mate. The Cubone, when it's born, kills the mom and doesn't remember it.
But just
But
remembers
it
the
just
trauma.
gets so sad because the mom is dead, so he puts the skull on.
Okay, now that
It's dark.
is some like real metal Bambi stuff. That's like Bambi by way of Japanese horror movies.
Yeah, no, it's not good.
It's all kind of what
So-
it is.
Pokemon World socially, we have the situation where the people that work at Pokemon centers, and even if we look at the new game, Scarlet Violet, the people that work in the Pokemart and the Pokemon centers are the same face.
Yes.
And you're assuming it's not the same people because they can't teleport. If they could, you should be doing that.
They're all just genetically similar, and they are eugenically bred for that goal. Which brings us to our
wait, eugenically bred or just like generations of inbreeding?
I don't know.
Yeah, it could
Unclear.
be both. Unclear.
Generations inbreeding it would also be technically a eugenics program, just an unintentional one.
Right. But it could have explained the low IQs.
That's fair. Yeah,
True.
no. Agreed. And so we come to this conclusion
We're
that
getting to some good stuff here.
We're getting to some good stuff.
Yeah.
We come to this conclusion that the Pokemon world is, in some sense, a de facto communist utopia.
100%.
Right?
It is where Marx went, and it worked.
And it worked. It didn't fail. There were no issues. It worked. We have people that are prescribed for particular jobs. They're happy in those jobs. They work them to the benefit of all society. And because we have a nurse Joy doing the hospitals, an Officer Jenny protecting stuff, a couple of people that were intended to run things from birth, we no longer have to worry about farming, upkeep, food, anything. And we know this because you can walk into any Pokemon Center anywhere if you're a trainer, and they will give you food and rest for the night.
And they will heal your Pokemon for free.
For free.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so we have this interesting communist structure where everybody knows what they should be doing, but moreover, and more importantly, which is what the problem with real communism, they're happy doing it. Nurse Joy is like, well,
and it's also why when you're 10, you set out to be a Pokemon master, because when you're 17, 18, you assume your role in society.
Maybe.
Perhaps.
And we will get to that, but I agree. So once you're 18, you get to assume your regular role in society. And we know there are a couple of
Unless you
different
become
jobs.
a master, then you can...
Unless you become a Pokemon master,
yes.
which is your way to escape this communist society.
Not that you are thinking about it. Like, it's not a thought of escaping. It's a thought of, like, I want to be a Pokemon master. And you become one, that's your job now. But if you don't, then you do your own thing.
Sort of realized your potential for society.
Right? So that's sociality, that's social, being a socialist society, which, like, the more I look at it, the more I'm like, somebody sort of treat this on how Pokemon works, like, as socialism. But it leads into the economics of Pokemon as well.
Yes.
Which is our next topic.
Right, so then we talk about, like, okay, well, that's fair, but how does money work in the Pokemon universe? Which raises really, really interesting questions, because we know we don't have to pay for generalized food. We have to pay for special food that ups Pokemon's abilities.
Or you can go to a diner, you can go to a restaurant and stuff. Yeah, you can eat. There's an economy of goods that exist.
That exist for luxuries.
Yes.
For non-essential
That's the
qualities.
important word. For luxuries.
For luxuries. Everybody has their essentials met by the people that are mean to met them, but people meet luxuries through purchasing, through items. The luxuries work on a capitalist sort of system. And I think the first thing that we come to realize very quickly is that Pokemon, or the ability to raise them as a champion, is very, very expensive. Not prohibitively expensive, but we're talking the price of a very nice car. An incredibly nice car, a BMW. At least 70, 80 grand. Now, we don't get that information because a Pokeball, as purchased in the Pokemon world, is 200 yen, right?
200, yeah, whatever the money is.
200 Pokedollars,
yeah.
Right? But that equivalent...
Which doesn't sound like a lot, because in the universe, like, 200 Pokedollars is nothing compared to, like, buying something that's 5,000 Pokedollars.
Right.
Yeah.
Easy. Until you start to realize, like, who has Pokemon and who doesn't have Pokemon, right? Because not everybody has Pokemon. Some people just hang out on the street. Some people only have Pokemon, but they're Pokemon partners, which means that your Pokemon sort of hangs out next to you, and we don't know if they have a Pokeball or not. To be a Pokemon trainer, you have to have a Pokeball. And it raises some interesting questions about, like, why people would just have one Pokeball and why they would catch one Caterpie with that Pokeball and nothing else and try their hardest just to be that. Until you realize who starts giving you Pokeballs in the first place, right?
Who is it? Who gives you your first Pokeball or your first Pokemon?
Well, usually it's the professor.
The professor.
The professor.
Because the professor has the professor's role in society is to be the Pokemon professor, the grand big kahuna of knowledge of Pokemon.
The Nurse Joy for Pokemon.
Yes, which means that they have access to all resources that no one else has.
Right.
And they are, for lack of a better word, wealthy. So they're one of the exceptions of like the socialism pyramid. They're one of the top ones.
And we know this because if you ever look at Professor Oak's lab, especially in the early episodes, it is huge.
No, he has acres
of land in Japan, or the equivalent of Japan, right? Which
the
is
equivalent of one region of Japan.
This is not Nebraska, right, where acres are a little cheaper.
Yeah.
This is a highly prized, nice acres, and he has a whole lab with a huge research society. So even if he doesn't have like cash money society provides him quite a bit to run
Yes.
this. And Sonia's grandmother, same boat. She has a huge mansion. It's
Huge
3
mansion.
floors tall.
And she lives. She's the only house at the end of a large driveway road, and she also has a little Pokemon arena in front of her house.
And the assumption is that she owns everything on that road, too.
Everything.
I'm sure. She's studying that.
And everyone knows where she lives. They're like, oh, the professor, they live way down there.
Go look at that.
Yeah.
That's where she is. And she, as we said, hands Sonia her coat and makes her a professor at the end, so it continues this sort of generational
Nepotism.
Yeah. That happens. So she can only bestow professorship upon people that she either is directly related to or knows, and they become professors by that. And we see this again in the Pokemon anime in the newest seasons with Go and Ash, where they're always asking Chloe, one of the young female protagonists, if she's going to be a Pokemon professor like her dad. Everybody's like, oh, you don't have to study in school. You're just going to become a Pokemon professor.
They say, you don't have to do anything. You're going to become a professor. It's like, no, she has to study to do that, right?
But does she?
But does
I mean,
she?
you would think.
Or does she just get to be a Pokemon professor? So the professors are able to do this, which is why Ash's mom and your mom in the first Pokemon games is such a G, because she makes friends with your professor down the lane and says, hey, now that we're friends, instead of my son going off to become a box mover or whatever. He's going to do, right? Could you give him a Pokemon and give him a shot? And this is the equivalent of somebody handing the kid like a Ford race car and being like, all right, we're going to try to work our way up to Formula One. We're going to become the Grand Tour champion. So they've given you this not $200 Pokeball, but this probably the equivalent of $80,000 to $100,000 Pokeball. And they've said, go try to make your fortune. It's a big moment.
It's a big moment. It's a huge moment.
It's a big moment.
Not everyone gets to do it.
Not everyone gets to do it. Right? And we see that. You have kids that are not Pokemon trainers. Some kids are Pokemon trainers. And usually in the anime, kids that are Pokemon trainers are at some special academy or some very ritzy private school, or they're like James who grew up in a mansion.
They live in the forest because they have no more money left after buying a Pokeball.
Right. And this is their family's shot. Their family has given them like, you're our hopes and dreams. Here's a Pokeball. Try to make it happen. And once you have one Pokemon,
you can send your kids out there because even if they fail at being a Pokemon master, they can always come back and do the family business, whatever it is, because socialism.
Because they'll be all right. This is the equivalent of enrolling your kid in NBA basketball camp or in a very high-level private college preparatory university in our world.
However, if it doesn't work, they're fine.
They're fine.
Yeah.
Because everybody's taken care of to some extent, in some degree. So you go out there, you're making your life as a Pokemon trainer, and the question is, why, if we do this, why only children, right? And Scarlet kind of answers this and says, not only children.
Yes.
There are exceptions. As long as you're enrolled in Neuron Academy, you can be any age.
And they give you a Pokemon if you're enrolled there, and it's free.
So this is kind of like a governmental program
Yes.
to train the best Pokemon trainers to help protect the entire country. And we'll get into that because, as you mentioned, we have this strange case of Lieutenant Surge in the first game.
Yes.
Yeah, Lieutenant Surge is a veteran.
A veteran, an
Pokemon
American
saver.
veteran.
Yes.
In the equivalent of Japan.
Because, like, real world places also exist in the Pokemon universe. Like,
Yes.
Mew's DNA was found in South America.
South America, or in the show they mention they go to Hollywood at one point. Hollywood's
do.
a real place, and they watch films there. There's a guy that's trying to train Executor so that he can put on a magic show in Las Vegas.
Yep.
Yep.
That was one of the most annoying episodes I've ever seen of anything in my life.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
But Las Vegas exists in some capacity. And then, of course, the infamous Minnesota Vikings joke.
Yep. There's a joke in the first Pokemon movie where Jesse and James disguise themselves as Vikings. And they start rowing Ash and his friends to an island, and Ash goes like, I thought Vikings only existed in Minnesota. And it's just, wait, there's Minnesota in this world?
There's Minnesota.
And also you guys are into American football?
Yep. There is some equivalent of American football. There is in Minnesota. There's a bunch of things that are rough equivalents with this strange universal communist utopia economic structure put over everything. So America, as we recognize it, probably looks nothing like America currently. And we do know that the gambling exists because there are casinos.
Gambling exists not only in Las Vegas, but several. There's always a gambling town.
There's always a gambling town.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so we know there's a war from Lieutenant Surge, that he's an American veteran that has stayed on and become the gym leader after his time in the war. And he's one of the only adults that we see having Pokemon, and one of the only adults. And so one of the common sort of
Because
fan
even the gym
theories-
leaders are usually not adults.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so one of the common fan theories online is that there was not just a war, but a war that used Pokemon. And it was ghastly and terrible. The World War II of this particular universe. a bunch of people, and they sort of passed a global referendum that only children may possess Pokemon. They're such powerful weapons of destruction that only children may possess Pokemon unless you're a gym leader.
You're a gym leader or a Pokemon master.
Yeah, or you have a partner Pokemon who's not in a Pokeball,
Yes.
but you can just hang out with you a la Mr.
And I'm
Mime
sure there's
Ash.
some like real harsh sanctions for if that Pokemon goes berserk or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you can have like one, but you can't be a real Pokemon trainer, which is why these children have the opportunity. So you only have from 10 to 18 to make it as the equivalent of an F1 Formula driver, do the best you possibly can. And if you don't make it to gym status or champion status,
You go back to whatever it was. You
It's the
can
end of your
keep, I'm assuming you can keep your Pokemon, but
Yeah.
you can't like use them in battle anymore.
a little bit of Pokemon history.
Until you get to Scarlet Violet, because as long as you're enrolled in the academy, you can
Spain
still
has
do it.
special rules.
Spain has special rules.
As long as you're working through to your education to better yourself, you may still do it, which is why we have 40, 50-year-olds that have Pokemon, but every single one of them is a student.
Which feels like Spain being a workaround. Like if we ever need to go to war, we have more people with Pokemon.
It was real clever of the
Real
Spanish
clever.
government.
Real clever.
And they're constantly running these treasure hunts, but I'm sure that it's a ploy to basically say we have a whole army of Pokemon-ready trainers
Yep.
at any moment to go to war.
Yes.
Spain, I think, is the equivalent. Paldea is the equivalent of the United States in terms of their capacities.
They are. What is the thing? Like if you want to stop someone else, bring a bigger stick or something.
Yep.
They are trying to build the biggest stick they can.
Under the guise of education.
Yes.
Well, we're just trying to.
Which I mean
find our
is good
treasures.
because they are getting education, but the real thing is at the end they're going to be like, okay, the Kanto region is a bunch of bastards, so we're going to go attack them. Come on, Pokemon trainers. They'll be like, okay,
Let's do it,
Let's do
right?
it.
All you can take is a little bit of propaganda. You could get that wheel rolling
easily,
real quick.
easily. So if we go back to the economics though,
Right,
so we established a communist world / state
right.
with socialist, eugenics-based, creating opportunities for the same families.
Sure.
Why is Nemona's house so big?
Interesting question. So
Yeah.
first you have to know what Nemona's dad did. So even
First, Nemona. Let's go back a little bit.
Nemona.
Who's Nemona?
Nemona, again, is your rival in Scarlet and Violet. She's obsessed with battling to such an extent that she has multiple Pokemon. She picks up an extra Pokemon from the chairman of the university at the very beginning just because she'd like to have fun raising it alongside you.
And also, we learned that she likes to battle so much, which is sad because her parents are never home.
Parents are
so
never home.
she never got attention, and the way she wants to get their attention is by becoming a really good Pokemon trainer.
So even
So
in
here's
a,
some sad stuff for you. Yeah.
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 even in a perfect Pokemon society, there's still communist society. There still is like inventors, and the inventors are given credit because they invent new things. And we know that Nemona's dad is the inventor of the Rotom cell phone.
Oh.
So he is
Which
the one
would be the
who
equivalent of what in this universe?
probably Android, Samsung, right?
Yeah, I think it'd be like imagine if only one company in the world made cell phones.
Yeah,
He invented that.
yeah. So he's Tim Cook of Apple, right?
Yeah.
And he did that. Now, as we know, he
If
probably
Apple
did-
was the only company, so it's even like a yes, but also like if Apple was the only company that made
phones.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
iPhone was all there was.
Yes.
And we know that they put a Rotom inside every phone, which really is interesting for how many Rotoms must exist.
Yeah. I'm worried about the Rotom population.
Apparently, they say they love going into phones.
Well, I think that's what he did, because we know that he probably didn't invent a cell phone. Otherwise,
No.
somebody here knows how microprocessors work, and I just doubt that.
Yeah.
Right? So I think he invented a brick that
With a screen.
Rotoms like to live in.
Yeah.
And that's what he did. And I think a brick with glass is very capable for people in the Pokemon universe, and
Yep.
he's smart. He's probably got an IQ at least 100.
Yep.
He's probably worried about how he gets along with the rest of society because everybody else is paste eaters compared to him. But even he didn't invent a cell phone. I think he just invented Rotom's possession in the cell phone. But it's huge, and it invented everything. And you know this is huge because Nemona's house is huge. It's at the end of a long drive, 3 fountains, 5 floors, servants, a custom battle arena on a private
beach.
Right? And
Which you can, if you go back to episode 1 or 2, I put the picture up there on our YouTube feed. Go take a look.
It's big.
It's absurd. And the other thing is that it is in like a private like cape, right? And why this like distinguishes itself from other nice houses in the Pokemon universe is that this one is ostensibly built to be nice.
Right.
Like even in the game, they talk about how nice her house is. And there's some rumors online that the next expansion for Pokemon Scarlet Violet will see her parents show up, and her parents will finally understand how her house is so big. Because the other characters talk to her and they go like, "Wait, but you live in that huge house. Why are you like concerned about this?" And she's like, "Well, I just like to battle Pokemon," because she doesn't. They're all confused as to why she is worried with their mundane problems.
Trying so hard. Right.
Yeah.
Because she's just that innately wealthy. So we
Yes.
do have a little bit in our communist utopia of like Fidel Castro nonsense going on, where like there's the communist utopia and there's like the 1% who are still the 1%.
But it's also like you have the 1%ers that are strictly from nepotism, which are the professors, because they have done nothing as far as we know.
As far as we know.
But at least her parents invented a useful thing for society,
Useful device.
and it makes sense that they would make money because even if people don't buy Rotom phones, the government buys them and sends them to people.
I assume that her money is governmental.
Yes, I assume
I don't
as
think
well.
people are buying their Rotom phones. I think people just get them.
Just get
and
them.
I know that because your mom doesn't actually say, I bought you a Rotom phone. She says, I picked one up for you.
Yes.
So they're
That's
just distributed.
Yes.
Which is interesting. So it leads to this funny situation where Nimona exists in battles and becomes champion because she has all of the resources in the world to do that.
She is the case of a Formula One driver that is good at what they do, but got there also because their dad's a billionaire.
Yeah, and so they had it from the get-go.
It doesn't mean they're not talented. It just means that they had, the right support. Yeah.
I assume she showed up at Neurona Academy day one when everybody had one Pokemon that was probably a Caterpie on their team, and she had a team of 6.
And she even says that she never got a new Pokemon when she starts the game. When she starts at Neurona Academy 2 years ago, she never received a Pokemon. She brought her own.
She came in somehow with Pokemon previously there. This is also backed up by the type of subjects students learn. So obviously students learn like how to communicate in Pokemon languages, but they also learn human languages as well. But the human languages only go as far as hello, I love you. Over an entire year of study, that is what you learn. You're great. Math is a wild subject.
Math is... That question about the Pokeballs is monstrous. So one of the questions in the game, you go to math class.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this.
Sure.
If a Pokeball costs 200 yen, 200 Pokedollars.
Oh god, don't ask me math questions.
And hold on, a Pokemon costs 200 Pokedollars.
Alright.
You want to buy 10 Pokeballs. You have $2,000. $2,000.
Okay.
How many Pokeballs would you come out to?
And they cost 200 each.
Yes.
Yeah, 10.
That's
10. You would think. You would think it's 10, Brandon, but you clearly don't know how the Pokemon War works. Because when you say 10, they're like, no, it's actually 11. Because if you buy 10 Pokeballs, no matter what happens, they're going to give you an extra one.
A free Premier
Ball.
And that's an innate part of their economy.
The answer is 11, even though it's clearly 10, because you have $2,000 for 10 Pokeballs.
Math doesn't matter. But you spend the whole year learning that. And more.
And that's why they don't understand criticals, they don't understand type matchups, because that stuff is like weird, like algorithmically based stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Logically based stuff. And their logic is like barely with it. So we've got the Pokemon theory of economics. We understand how the society works to some extent. We understand what Pokemon are. But the key component that's missing here, the last thing that I want to talk about is why. Right? Because even if you have a society
There you go.
where you have tiny monsters that live around you all the time,
Sure.
and everything is provided for and is inhibitedly expensive, but the monster's willing to help you, how is your first thought, and then we fight them, right?
John, why don't you tell us the message of the first Pokemon movie real quick? What happens at the end of the first Pokemon movie?
I love the ending of the first Pokemon movie. So at the end of the first Pokemon movie, Mewtwo creates all these evil clone Pokemon, and he makes them fight the good Pokemon, and they all get into a battle, and it's so horrific. You just have Pikachu's slapping each other until tears appear on their faces and bruises happen.
Okay, so the Pokemon clones are more powerful than the regular clones.
More powerful.
So Mewtwo's like, all right, you want me to prove how good they are? So he takes away every Pokemon's power.
Abilities.
So now all they can do is just fisticuffs.
Fisticuffs each other, and they do so brutally. And while doing it, it's such a horrible scene, not just for the viewer, but for the Nurse Joy who was there, and Ash and Misty, and
even Team Rocket.
Even Team Rocket. And they all look, and one by one, they sort of come to this realization.
Literally one by one. They really wanted them to have the time here, so one by one,
they're like, this is terrible. Pokemon aren't meant to fight. And Nurse Joy even is like, Pokemon are not meant to fight. Not like this. Because we have to throw a line and realize that we're always fighting Pokemon.
Yeah.
And so we come to this realization that, like, why are we fighting Pokemon? They don't seem to have any, like, innate nature. They don't seem to, like, there's nothing in the Pokemon economy that supports fighting.
And even Mewtwo says this, right? He's like, why are you obeying these humans' commands and fighting each other?
Right.
Yeah.
Theory number 4.
This is the good one.
Mewtwo is not subjected to this one because Mewtwo was not actually an innate Shinto spirit.
Technically not a Pokemon. If you
Not
like
a Pokemon.
It. Yeah. A creature
Created in a lab.
Yeah.
And because we've never seen Mewtwo in the series.
Porygon as well.
Yeah.
But Porygon is, I would argue that Porygon is programmed, and the way it works is there's a spirit that inhabited the program.
Yeah. So I think Porygon's closer to Rotom
Yes.
than Mewtwo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mewtwo is not this way, and especially in the show, Mewtwo has never been captured, right? This Mewtwo just exists outside of this. And so there's no indication that Mewtwo actually is a light spirit. Mewtwo might be made of meat muscle, programmed somehow to mimic Pokemon, and therefore be the strongest.
Yes.
Sure.
Which is why he doesn't understand this, because the rest of the spirits, theory number 4, require battle to sustain and grow their spiritual energy. I believe that Pokemon are symbiotic parasites that feed on humans to help them grow and to help them sort of nurture. So they're not hurting humans, but because spirits don't exist as corporeal things, because spirits exist as entities, the only way for spirits to grow, become more powerful,
And evolve.
Eventually.
That's why they evolve after battles.
Evolve after battle is to test themselves. And the only way you test a spirit is to grind it against another spirit, like a whetstone, like a sword, to bring it into corporeal existence through battling. So they have to find ways to battle. Now, battling in the wild is problematic, because if you are a Caterpie spirit and you get into a battle with a Pidgey spirit and it just greases you, we find a situation like we did with Lieutenant Surge, where you are so damaged you can't even recover and you die, maybe become a Ghastly. It's a problem, right? You need a battle that is just enough of a battle to really test your spirit, Dragon Ball Z style, but not enough to kill you or destroy you in any way, which means you need a partner to constantly watch over you while you battle against other spirits, and to set you up in battles with spirits that are equitable as much as possible. And this is how Pokemon, I think, long back in the day in Arceus, when people started catching Pokemon, started to see, there's a very beneficial relationship with humans here. If we listen to the humans, we're constantly put in these spiritual tests, and these spiritual tests allow us to grow, allow us to nurture. And so they team up with humans. This is why the Alakazams help humans build societies.
And allow them to grow as a species. And that's why we have more Pokemon now than ever.
Right.
Because more and more people are training more and more Pokemon since 300 years ago.
And battling them and breeding them. And, breeding explains why we never see Pokemon, like, R-rated. We never see Pokemon have sex. We never see Pokemon deliver eggs. They just appear in baskets.
And no one knows how they appear. If you ask a professional Pokemon breeder, they will say, sometimes I put 2 Pokemon out there together and I come back and there's an egg. And I'm like, but you never stood there to see what happened? They're like, nope.
I argue they probably did, but the eggs appear at light speed because it's just a manifestation of light, right? And it becomes an egg and the egg hatches into a Pokemon. But we allow them to do this by having them near each other, by battling, by working with them. And so the Pokemon are constantly, through the development of our society, through the development of Pokemon battles, encouraging humans to raise and train and fight Pokemon, which is also why, going back to episode 1, we don't have to feel morally bad about this. We are being used in this scenario to better and further Pokemon.
The reason they battle Pokemon is because Pokemon are like, wow, we need to battle to do this, so we're going to let humans catch us. And they even talk about this in the anime. They say, Pokemon that are wild are jealous of Pokemon that have been caught by a trainer.
Because Pokemon that are wild have to risk their lives
every day. To
just sustain themselves. Pokemon that are caught by a trainer have a cush life, get to essentially become the equivalent of their fullest selves. Their Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they're at the very top, and they don't have to try very hard, and they know they're always safe, because humans call off the battles before it's too long. 0 HP isn't Pokemon death. 0 HP is like half power for these spirits.
Yeah.
Right? And they know they'll always be called back at 0 HP, put in a safe Pokeball, restored, brought out again to do more battling, to grow stronger.
So they are Shinto. This also reinforces the Shinto spirits point.
Right.
They are Shinto spirits that to grow and to test their mettle and be like, okay, I am a flower spirit. I'm not supposed to be very powerful, but maybe with the help of a human and putting me in the right situations, I can beat a dragon.
I can beat a dragon.
Yes.
It is possible. And through that, maybe realize some greater goal, right? Come into full fruition, reach the Pokemon equivalent of Nirvana.
Well, and
right?
also if
Sure,
you like,
yeah.
if you look at the Shinto history and like say it's not religion, but the Shinto like ethos, it's basically the spirits don't always get along, which is what happens in the Pokemon world. So a lot of times you'll have a water spirit that's like, I want more water in this region, so I'm gonna destroy the forest spirit that lives here so I can flood this region.
Right.
So a lot of these Pokemon spirits are maybe like a little Caterpie's, like, I want more forests, so I need to let this dude use me in battle until I become Butterfree, come back here with other Butterfree, and we can fight all these other spirits.
Readjust the balance of nature.
Yes.
Oh boy.
And that answers why Pokemon exist, which goes back to our original point.
Yes.
Is at this point that I believe I've done enough work, and I think we've all done enough work here to become Pokemon professors.
I mean, I feel like I've fulfilled it. Submitted
Easily.
in partial
Easily.
fulfillment of the requirements.
Also, Pokemon professors, even though they don't do any sort of, from my understanding, medical thing, they always wear a jacket, like a lab coat.
It's true.
Yeah.
So,
Because
we
there
just
aren't
have to
doctors in this world. If you stub your toe, you're dead.
We just gotta get ourselves some
No,
knowledge.
actually, there is an anime episode with the real hospital, and they go in there and they're like, "Doctor, you have to heal my Pikachu or whatever it is."
He's
And he's
like,
like,
I'm a human doctor.
"Yeah, I'm a human doctor." But then by the end of the episode, he's healing all the Pokemon.
Yep.
Which means that in Human Doctor University, there are classes in essentially what is veterinary
Medicine.
Yeah.
Or as close to that as they have.
It's close as
Ecclesiastical veterinary
Yes,
medicine.
yes, exactly.
Yes.
But they don't see it as that.
And I assume the doctors are the best of the best. They're as good as you get.
Yeah.
So like IQ of 110.
Yeah, it also explains, on a side note again, it also explains, like, why people are less injured by Pokemon attacks in the series.
Yeah.
Because
That's good.
Charizard's fire, Charizard's water, or Gyarados' water, Pikachu's electricity, aren't actual manifestations of fire, water, electricity. They're manifestations of that spiritual energy.
Of light.
Of light.
Yes.
So Ash is getting hit by what he thinks is fire, what he probably perceives as some degree of heat. But I would argue that if he stuck his hand into a campfire, it would do far more damage.
Wait, but then we get facts in the Pokedex about like the heat that Pokemon can achieve.
Yeah, so they can achieve that if they really tried hard, but if we're just doing like a one-off fire breath, we're just throwing a bit of light your way. There's a different... But then if they crank it all the way up, if they manifest all of their energy into a Kamehameha wave, we hit...
I think I see what you're saying, but it doesn't. It like the I
Tendons.
don't the like of they can generate whatever how much heat with a flamethrower. You can measure that with a thermometer, but it's still light hitting you. So it doesn't do damage as much as like 1 million degrees of heat. See what I'm saying?
I'm not actually entirely sure that fits the lore because there's an episode where a Charmeleon is referred to as my glass cutting partner. So the Charmeleon is used
Can
to
at
help
least
cut
heat glass.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that because they are spirits that interact with other things, they can always affect things. But because the humans are not part of what they can inhabit, they hit them as light.
Or maybe the alternate theory, the humans have spiritual energy themselves that protects them to some degree. That their ki protects them from the Pokemon's spiritual blasts.
Although you see, you do
But it
see,
hits a rock as if it was real fire.
yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I see that in the anime, they are like in the anime. To discredit, does a good job of showing like Pokemon are scary
Yes.
because they are wild creatures that blow fire.
Yeah.
So if you run, that's why in the early games when they're like, you don't want to go in there with just no Pokeballs.
It could be real bad.
It could be real bad because there are wild animals that can like literally whip up a hurricane. You don't want that, right? So I think there's the weird contradiction there. I think that it's kind of a situation where we are spirits also that can have a spiritual protection, and it hits us as light, whereas it hits other objects as not. But that's why like a Mewtwo attack could kill you because a Mewtwo is too powerful, or a Mew could toss you across the world because they are so powerful that their spiritual energy, your spiritual energy doesn't protect you. But if a Caterpie launches a string shot at you, you'll be like, psst, it'll just bounce off.
Well, and once that Pokemon energy manifests as physical things, like once the Pidgey beats its wings, sends out the energy, creates a hurricane, that's a hurricane.
Yeah.
It's a real hurricane. So that probably damages you to some extreme extent.
Yes.
But then by the same token, when the Charizard spits fire, it's now created a fire, so that's a real fire.
Yeah, there's some weirdness around Charizard's fire for sure of when it becomes a real fire. Because if it hits you straight from here to your face, it just blackens your face a little bit.
But if it puts it on the ground, then you put your hand on it. I would argue that's because it's interacting with like something
With
else.
the matter?
With the matter, yeah.
Interesting. Wait, but wouldn't it always be interacting with something else because it hits the air? Now I'm being real pedantic, but...
I think that...
Well, that's why it does blacken your face.
Yeah.
It doesn't leave you unscathed.
But Phil's point was that if you like touch it after it interacted with matter on the ground, it would be worse. But I was trying to puzzle that out because I'm like, but it's always interacting with
My
something.
argument is that
What's
the
it?
Shinto spirits can't inhabit air, oxygen. They can inhabit the ground, though.
Yet, we'll wait and see if there's a Zephyr Pokemon at some point.
There's a Drifloon, but the
Drifloon is corporeal matter.
Wait, what about Tornadus? I mean, he's pure flying type.
But he's still he
there's
has
a
like
ma- there's a
some
form.
mass to him.
Yeah.
True,
We don't have like
true.
a Zephyr Pokemon yet.
Right, we don't have like a wind Pokemon.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then hair.
So that's what
Okay.
like, if it's something that they can inhabit, then that thing, once it interacts with the fire, with the hurricane, whatever it is, it then becomes fire.
Yeah.
But if it's straight from the Charizard's mouth, it'll do damage to other Pokemon because they are also light. So that's just fire to them.
Fair. You know, I
Yeah.
want to point out that in the last hour and 15 minutes, we've put more thought into the mythology of the Pokemon verse than I would wager the company has in
Oh, absolutely.
in 30 years.
And here's the fun part about this. We have done this for about an hour and made no money. And the people in the Pokemon universe have done this for about 15 minutes and make billions.
$billions.
I'm just saying,
We've
man.
existed in the
Yeah.
wrong universe.
We live in the wrong universe.
We live in
yeah,
the wrong
for sure.
universe.
Yes. Sometimes people are like, what like anime universe would you like to like bring in? I'm like, no, I don't want to bring it in here. I want to go there. Yeah.
Right? Be like, guys, have you considered how fulcrums work? And they're like, oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness.
I know. Like, actually, I'm teaching Jurassic Park this week, and I wanted to. One of my
You're gonna
lessons
look
is
at
on
how a Velociraptor opens doors.
that I can kind of believe because the shape of the door.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
like
yeah.
my mom's cats have figured out what doorknobs.
If
do.
it was a circular door, do you think the Velociraptor would be able to open it?
probably not.
Yeah, they just
Not enough grip.
need to make a circular door. I mean, they could just punch through it.
Exactly,
You
which is
think
what they
somebody
do.
that
They
had
just
enough smarts to invent dinosaurs would have the,
Yeah.
whatever.
well, that's part of the whole.
That's part of the
That's
whole-
part of the whole
yeah, yeah.
thesis of what Michael Crichton was trying to do.
Right.
But one of the things I want to talk to them about is how some of the things in like the Jurassic Park sequels start making absolutely zero sense.
0 cents.
Yeah, it's just like, all right, perfect military strategy, dinosaurs. It's like, I want to go to the Jurassic Park universe so I can introduce them to the concept of a drone because I'll make tons of cash.
Yeah.
Like,
Just a bunch.
hands over fist. I'll be like, here, check this out. So it can fly. It won't eat you. All right? You don't have to feed it.
You can also attack the dinosaurs with it without being in any peril
Yeah,
whatsoever.
and it can carry like guns and missiles and attack from literally miles away.
You know, once you start looking into like unmanned stuff, like the Pacific Rim pitch meeting,
Yes.
it's like so they figured out how to make giant mechs, but not how to control them from far away.
How to make them. Well, and Star Wars does that all the time too. You're
Oh, yeah.
like, you have the ability to move across galaxies at a whim, but your computers still run on 8-bit. And obviously, the answer is George Lucas.
Yeah.
Picked through a garage, was like, this looks futury, and made this a set piece.
Yep.
But, yeah. But that's what we like asking. We're like, all right, so that exists. We know that exists. We establish that as fact. And once we establish that as fact, what are the implications of that
Yes.
being a fact for the entire
So
Yeah.
to close off on this topic real quick, so here's the implications that were the facts and implications we got to. First of all, Pokemon ontology. What is a Pokemon?
Shinto spirit, made of light.
Shinto spirit made of light.
We'll put it down.
Are they animals, objects? Yes.
Kind of.
Yes, to
Yep.
both. They are
both.
whatever they inhabit, right? What is the Pokemon purpose?
To battle, to strengthen itself.
So it can strengthen itself.
Yeah,
right.
in some way.
That's why we don't feel bad about using them to fight each other.
Not immoral. Actually,
Not
incredibly
actually.
moral. And if anybody's being hurt in this relationship, it's humans.
It's humans.
Who are being used and fed upon. But really, they're making out all right.
It's
all right.
a symbiotic relationship, I would say.
Until later in the future, when maybe Pokemon inhabit everything and become robot overlords.
Oh yeah, well in Violet, whatever 10,000 years in the future, Pokemon are just now robots, and this is part of a theory too, where they have the Pokemon like from 9,500 years in the future figured out that if we don't have corporal forms, because we need to inhabit something.
Right.
But if we inhabit a fish, I have to eat fish. I can die. My body can get sick. If I become a cyborg or a machine, all I have to worry about is battling, because all I need is spiritual energy.
Perfect
so
evolution.
They start becoming robots, and then eventually they create robots that can create robots. And now all the Pokemon in the future are no longer corporal beings, but they resemble the corporal beings they used to be, because that's the form they like to take. Kind of like Ultron, he wants to be the human form.
Right.
They want to be the forms they originally were. But now they're all robots, and then they destroy the real Pokemon and perhaps humans?
Probably people. I think it's very likely that all people in the year 10,000.
Essentially, what we're saying is in 10,000 years, the humans are extinct, and Pokemon are robots that rule everything.
If you're going to live in the Pokemon world, the year 400 from Arceus is probably where you want. Like right around Kanto.
That's
Gen
where you want to
1,
be.
Gen 2.
Yeah.
That's good.
And even if you look at like the timeline, Gen 1 and 2, and I think Gen 3 and 4, like these gens happen at the same time.
Right.
Like if you look at the Pokemon like timeline,
right.
like in the games, they happen at the same time.
Right.
Yeah. So I think Gen 1 and 3 happen at the same time. Gen 2 and 4 happen at the same time. It's kind of crazy stuff like that.
Yeah.
Pick your favorite region. Go there some point in that period.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't go far into the future thinking it's cool, because you're going to be the only human hunted by Terminators that are also
species.
Pokemon.
Yes.
So we decided Pokemon purpose is to battle because they have to.
Yep.
They're Shinto spirits. Economics, it is a total socialist state where you still have situations where someone invents something crazy and they become rich because the government gives them money. But a socialist state where if you don't become a Pokemon master, you can go back to whatever job you were supposed to do in the first place.
A successful socialist state. So
successful,
we
yes.
are not advocating for socialist states because in real life there's problems. But here, perfect.
It worked.
It worked. Works great.
And there's a Pokemon war. That's why only kids have Pokemon, or a student.
Or students. Yep.
What other nonsense did we get into?
Professors and gym leaders.
Yes.
And it's prohibitively expensive to do so.
Expensive to do everything, which is why it's a socialist state that the government provides everything until you get to a certain point. So you're never going to starve, but you're also never going to make it very far.
But $200 is a lot of money.
A lot of money.
Crazy amount.
So complicated stuff.
Complicated stuff.
A lot of contradictory stuff that we try to go over here.
A pixel of depth for you.
Pixel of depth.
In your Pokemon games.
So whenever you're playing Pokemon the next time, think of why your Gyarados can use Hyper Beam. Light energy. So we have kind of a fun thing we want to do here at the end. So Pokemon is the top media franchise by revenue in the world. It is the biggest media franchise, and that includes video games, that includes trading cards, that includes anime, movies, of which there are like 25. That includes everything.
Which is why, even if you're like, it's a kid's game, it's still worth talking about.
100%.
I mean, people have written books and books and books about subjects like Lord of the Rings. Doesn't even compare to Pokemon.
Not even close. So I'm going to ask these two guys right here, the two other professors. I have a list here from Statista, cite your sources, kids, of what are the revenue of selected media franchises worldwide as of August 2021. Okay? So the top is Pokemon, as I said. It was $105 billion in 2021 with a B.
And that's total that it's made over its
revenue,
entire...
not profit. Revenue. So that's how much money it brought in.
Just this year.
2021.
Wow. It brought in over 100 billion just last year.
I believe so. I have to read. Let me read it. Hold on. It might be forever.
Might be total revenue.
Might be total.
Total revenue up to that date.
Yes.
That sounds more realistic.
Up to August 2021.
That's still insane.
$105 billion.
Yeah.
Okay?
Wow.
As we were saying, we made zero money making this. And we thought about this more than people that made this game, and they've made $100 billion. What do you think is the second biggest media franchise worldwide as of August 2021?
Well, it's either Star Wars or the MCU, or my two guesses.
I'll say Disney as a conglomerate.
Okay. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, all of them. Disney.
I will say that Disney is not doesn't that's not a thing.
That's not a thing.
It's not a thing.
Okay,
Disney is too over. That's a company. So it's a media franchise. So think IPs.
IPs. Mickey Mouse.
Mickey Mouse is a good one. A good guess. However, you're both wrong. Mickey Mouse is fourth at $80 billion.
Wow. close there though.
Winnie the Pooh is third.
Winnie the Pooh?
What?
Winnie the Pooh. You also have to think these exist for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's because it's total revenue.
Number 2 at 84. So Pokemon's 105.
Can I make another guess?
Yeah.
Harry Potter.
No. Number 2. So a Pokemon is 105.
Right.
Number 2 is
Yeah.
at 84.
Okay.
So there's a $20 billion gap.
Between the
Number 2 is Hello Kitty.
What? What?
To be fair, they have a lot of different things. They've
And
been
the
around
merch.
for a long time. The merch.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
merch.
merch is where you make money. It's not the thing itself.
So you said Star Wars, right?
I said Star Wars, MCU, and Harry Potter.
Star
Those
Wars
are
is
my, like,
fifth.
three.
Fifth. There's a lot
At
of merch. in Star Wars.
68.
Yeah.
So it's the $12 billion gap
Half
to Mickey
of what
Mouse.
Pokemon is.
Yes. Star Wars is
Crazy.
almost half of Pokemon. Think about that, all you haters.
Yeah.
I think it's a kids game. Yeah. Number 6 is Disney Princesses. So like just
all
the
of them.
IP of
Yeah,
princesses.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Number 7 is Unpunmon, which is a very specific child cartoon and manga anime in Japan.
That's what One Punch Man is based off of.
Yes.
Right? Like, roughly?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you ever looked at Unpunmon, I'm gonna put it in there. It's like, I can't even describe how simple it is. Like, it's someone drew a stick figure and colored it, and it's the 8th biggest media franchise ever.
Is the merch. Got it.
Harry Potter is 10th, and then you have the Marvel Cinematic Universe at 8th.
That's going to climb.
Yeah, it's climbing. It's
gonna
climbing.
climb.
This is 2021.
Yeah.
What do we think is between the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Harry Potter?
That's a good question. What is more popular than Marvel in 2021, but less popular than Harry Potter?
And remember, it's time. And this is a guessable. This is not going to be Unpunmon.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's see.
It pops in my head, but I'm just saying there's no way it's Lord of the Rings.
Final Fantasy?
Lord of the Rings is on this list, but it's not that. Final Fantasy is not. Final Fantasy didn't sell very well for a while.
Okay.
Yeah, even though there's a lot of because it was like its own kind of game. Like the reason it's called Final Fantasy is because it was the creators' Final Fantasy was to create a game that was with story, and people were like, it's never gonna sell, and then it sold enough to make another one, but it's not like a crazy media franchise yet.
Halo.
Halo is not on this list, although its rival Call of Duty is.
Okay.
Yeah, because of
That
more
helps.
platforms.
Yeah.
Number 9 is Mario.
Oh, Mario makes total sense.
Mario.
Yeah.
You really just got to go down the list of like theme park things.
Yes.
You're like,
Yeah.
what has gotten its own theme park?
In that vein, what is 11? 11 is wild because of what we think of it as now, but it's been around since like 60s, 70s, and 80s, and it was huge. It was huge.
Big in the 60s, 70s, 80s, but not big now.
Like, it's big now, but it's like flashy big now. And in the 60s, 70s, 80s, it was like, it's hard to describe. Just guess and you'll get what I'm saying.
Okay. 60s, 70s, 80s. That predates, so it can't be like Dragon Ball Z or any of your 90s anime because it existed before that.
Although Dragon Ball is also in this list.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. It's there. Oh, man. Is it... Is it like Peter Pan? Something like that?
I like that guess. No.
Superman?
Superman is an interesting guess.
Superman's a good guess.
It's Transformers.
What?
Transformers.
Because the toys were really
Toys,
popular.
it's the merch.
Oh,
You gotta
merch.
think about the merch.
man.
And they had the shows that were horribly animated but good at the time.
Yeah.
And now we have Michael Bay stuff where like, wow, how is this working? Well,
Because evidently
yes.
it's one of the
So
biggest...
it's made in its lifetime $30 billion.
Wow.
Next is the first superhero on the list. By itself.
By itself.
By
standing
itself.
alone.
Batman.
Standing alone.
Batman.
No. Batman is the second superhero on the list after this one.
Superman.
Nope. Superman's not on the list. Superman's dumb. I have an argument about that.
I mean, you're objectively
Yeah.
wrong. To beat you up.
But I would have definitely put it as Batman. Who? Spider-Man.
Yep.
Spider-Man.
Yeah.
People love Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Okay, then Dragon Ball, then Call of Duty. Then there's one that it's like 20th on this list or something, like 18th, 15th. There's a movie coming out about it very soon. First movie ever coming out about it. That's live action.
Live action movie. So not Mario.
D&D.
No, good guess though.
That was my only
Live
guess.
action movie coming out. Little Mermaid?
There's never been a live action or a movie about this that's not like a extended commercial.
My Little Pony.
Good guess. In the same vein, Barbie.
Barbie.
Barbie
of course.
is $25 billion.
I want to see that movie. I think
Next.
it's gonna be good.
They're not going to play a Barbie girl-less song in there.
I think it's gonna be real self-aware. I think
I
it's gonna
hope
be
so.
really, really good.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think it's going to be a good comedy. Next is Gundam. The amount of things that are only Japanese in this list are insane.
And in just the 90s.
Yes.
Like Japan's cultural 90s impact.
Only Japanese.
Huge.
Like, Gundam is big in the world, but it's like, I mean, it's not as big as like something from the West, right? But crazy. Toy Story next.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
And then the last one on this list, which is 20th, is Middle Earth in general. Lord of the Rings, everything.
The whole thing.
Books, movies, games,
Yeah, that's
whatever, cards.
We're close to that one coming out of copyright. I'm really interested to see what happens when that one falls out, because that's the first, I think, of like the major media franchises that people care about that is not owned by Disney that might actually fall out of copyright.
It's $20 billion.
Because Disney doesn't let go of anything. But
Here, there's a Disney IP that is 19th on this list. That is a more recent IP that somehow has raked in over the last
Frozen.
2 decades.
Frozen.
No. $22 billion. Why would you think Frozen? Think of the thing.
That song was everywhere.
The song was everywhere. How much Frozen merch is there?
I see a lot of Elsa
decent
dresses.
amount.
Yeah.
What is one of the franchises where you can sell the most merch out of? It's not Toy Story, obviously.
Yeah, Toy Story is an easy one. Second to that, oh man.
This thing has only made 200 million less than Toy Story.
So definitely like Encanto, not Big Hero 6. That have decent merch.
Although I guess you could sell a lot of superhero merch and stuff. Yeah.
Like stuff like gloves and.
I believe it's a Disney Pixar thing. So I don't know if that helps.
Isn't it Incredibles?
No.
Cars.
Cars.
That's the only one on the list I got.
Cars, because you can sell car toys.
It's all about the
and
toys.
Car games.
Yeah.
And car series.
And car
then you can make
cars.
aeroplanes as a spin-off. Right? So Cars has made more money than pretty much anything else in the world. Except for like 18 things.
Except for Pokemon.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Well, Cars has made 5 times less money than Pokemon. Which I want to say is still kind of crazy.
That's
actually.
crazy.
Yeah.
Because Cars?
Cars?
If you ask me what is the ratio of Pokemon to Cars in terms of size?
I would have put it.
I put like 1 to 35
Yeah.
or something. It's 1 to 5 in merch.
That's crazy.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Hey, Cars has done real well for its.
They do have their own like section at Disney World.
And that second movie had like Lewis Hamilton and all these famous drivers in there.
Yeah.
Even though the second one is like weirdly contradictory to whatever they're trying to do, which it seems like a thing they try to always do.
Cars 2 is a wild ride.
Wild ride.
That if we're not going to do it because it's not a video game, but if we ever want to get into like implications of universes based on
Wild ride.
Cars 2, crazy.
Just on Cars 1, it's kind of.
Cars 1 is weird, but Cars 1 at least is kind of coherent.
So the thing, we did that because it was a little fun exercise, and I hope you, listener, know that now Pokemon has made at least $20 billion more than anything else. And second...
That's pre-Scarlet and Violet.
Pre-Scarlet and Violet.
Which was their biggest...
And second is Hello Kitty. So...
Wow.
If you like Hello Kitty out there, you are in the majority.
You're in the majority.
Keep going.
Don't let the Lord of the Rings fans shame you.
Or even the Star Wars fans, because they're below Hello Kitty.
They're below Hello Kitty.
But apparently so are the Batman fans.
So the Batman
honestly, every single other thing you can think of, except for Pokemon.
Except for
Which
Pokemon.
is why we started with Pokemon.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now we're going to go to a different game that is not even close to be on this list because it's small-ish and new. Kind of new, and it won Game of the Year.
And it won a Hugo Award.
It won a Hugo Award.
Which is why we're sort of choosing it. And the second game is coming out.
Yes.
So we're preparing for the second game, which is going to come out maybe half a year or a year from now, but we'll be ready.
Yes.
I didn't know there was going to be a second one.
So the game we're playing is Hades.
Hades.
Which is a asymmetrical beat-em-up roguelike.
Yes.
Which means that you are beating a lot of images on screen, and roguelike means that you die and come back, basically, and try to beat the same levels again.
Very hard.
Very difficult, right? So you don't usually get through roguelikes in one go because it's impossible to do that.
Or at least
really difficult.
Somebody may have done it.
So Hades, John, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the story of Hades and because it's one of your favorite games ever, right?
Yeah, so we'll talk about it and get into it more because I love Greek mythology. Mythology is one of the courses here. I teach at this university. I really like to talk about mythology, deal with mythology, and Greek mythology is kind of the center of Western mythology, right? And this takes place in Greek mythology, and we'll get into a lot more detail later. But the baseline story is a very relatable one. This kid hates his dad, but his dad is the leader of the underworld, and he wants to get out of there. And so your job is to escape the underworld, because you can't tell me what to do, Dad.
Yeah, even though you are my real dad.
Even though you are my real dad.
You can't tell me what to do.
And it develops from there.
And the thing that's interesting about Hades is that it's made by a relatively small like publisher, Supergiant, which is it's not Sega, it's not Nintendo. They put out a game every once in a while, and they put all their efforts into one game, and it's not a long game. It's like 15 to 20 hours. So compared to like other large games, they're 60 or 70 hours. But it came out, it's so polished, and the gameplay is so good, and the story is so good, that it won Game of the Year, which is a high honor. Like games like Breath of the Wild and Elden Ring win that thing. It's not easy. And it won a Hugo Award for video games, but it's still the most artistic video game of the year, basically.
The very first game that they thought, hey, this is so good, we should create a separate category in our science fiction writing competition just for this game.
And it won, and now it's a category that exists.
Yep.
Yes. So we're going to be playing that starting in 2 weeks. Well, we're going to do a preview in 2 weeks, but we're going to be playing that for the next 6 weeks. So look out for that, because it should be a fun time. I've never played it. Brandon's played a little bit of it, and John has played all of it.
So much.
So we're going to have different experiences here, and it's going to be different in our Pokemon series, because we're not like wildly invested in the backstory as much.
Right.
Because it's based in the real world, quote unquote.
Like it'll be hard enough that we don't have to create any special rules.
Yes, we're not nuzlocking Hades, because that would, I think, actually be impossible.
It would break you.
Yeah. All right, so that's what we had for today. If you want to leave any comments on Pokemon lore or any questions, we'd be, I assure you, really happy to answer
write you
those.
some essays.
Yeah, because this is kind of what I do for a living, except I say it's theory based.
Thank you for joining us.
For those of you who are listening to this and know what I do for a living, it is theory based.
It is
100%. But yeah, thank you for listening to this. So we're gonna wrap it up. I guess so. Yeah. Okay. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. I'm Professor Phil Chavot. That's Professor John Adams. Professor Brendan West. Together, we're professors who play games. And remember, this is the only show you can come to if you want your video game discussions to have just a pixel of deep thinking, as you saw today, but mostly just nonsensical conversations.
Which we also saw today.
Oh, yes. You will always see that. See you in a couple weeks.
Bye.
See you then.